Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. We're so pleased to welcome you here today. My name is Courtney. I'm the Director of Donor Engagement here at Calgary Public Library Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our a really interesting webinar with our Calgary Public Library Collections team. This is going to be all about how the books that you borrow every day make it to the shelves and ultimately into your hands. And we know this is a topic that's interesting to a lot of people. So we're really pleased that you're all able to join us today. Thank you so much for being here. As we get started, I'd like to begin our session with a land acknowledgement. With gratitude, mutual respect, and reciprocity, we acknowledge the ancestral home, culture, and oral teachings of the Treaty 7 signatories, which includes the Siksika Nation, Piikani Nation, Kainai Nation, the Ithkastoni Nakota Nation, consisting of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Goodstoney bands, and the people of the Tsuut'ina Nation. The city of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to the Otipemisiwak Métis government, Métis Nation Battle River Territory, Nose Hill Métis District 5, and Elbow Métis District 6. At Calgary Public Library, we celebrate stories, the stories of the community and the land we live on. We serve the community on Winchispa, Gutitsi, and Moginsis, which describe the gathering place where the Bow and Elbow rivers meet. We respect all people who share, celebrate, and care for Treaty 7 territory of Southern Alberta, and we honor the original caretakers of the land who remind us of the ongoing histories that precede us. We recognize our shared responsibilities going forward to help bring everyone together on this journey of truth and reconciliation. So thank you once again so much for joining us today for Collections Uncovered with Calgary Public Library's collection team members. We have a really great presentation in store for all of you today. Before I introduce my fantastic collections colleagues, I want to provide a little bit of background as to why Calgary Public Library Foundation was inspired to set up this webinar today. This webinar is inspired by our new 5th book campaign. This is a fundraising campaign for every book and every reader. Calgary Public Library currently has record-breaking membership. Nearly 60% of city residents are active library members, which I can't get enough of that fact because I just think it's such an interesting and important one. There's so few institutions that can say that they serve that percentage of the city's population. It's pretty remarkable when you think about it, especially as active members, meaning they've used their card actively in the last 2 years. On average, 425 people are joining the library every single day, which is also another mind-boggling fact. So as you can imagine, the demand for quality books and other collection items is very high. At the same time, the average cost of a book in Canada has gone up by about 20% in the last 5 years. So what this means is that for every 5 books the library could previously afford, today they can only afford to purchase 4. Hence, the 5th book campaign was born. It's our goal as the Library Foundation that we can help to expand and enhance collections and put that 5th book, as it were, back on the shelf through the support of our donors. It's really inspired by the idea that through donor support, we can get the right book in the right hands at the right time. So just with a bit of that context in mind, our collections team today is going to explain a little bit more about their fascinating work in the world of library collections. They're going to tell us a little bit about the art and science, and it truly is an art and science of building a library collection. They're going to tell us a little bit about how the books that you might have on your holds list right now end up there. Why they might be there for a long time sometimes, and ultimately tell us a little bit more about some of the pressures that they face in this kind of changing world of library collections and books. This webinar, as you can see, is being recorded, so we will circulate this following the presentation today. We're really looking to continue to build momentum for this campaign. So we definitely encourage you to share this webinar widely. Hopefully you will enjoy it and learn lots of new things and want to share those pieces of information with your community and with the 60% of people who have active library cards. If you have questions during the presentation, you can use the Q&A function just on the bottom of your screen there to submit questions to us, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as we can following the presentation. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our wonderful collections colleagues who are here with us today. Genevieve Luthi, who is Director of Collections at Calgary Public Library. Susan Stantz, who's a digital selector in collections, and Jan Smith, who is a selector in collections as well at the library. Welcome to you all, and I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Courtney. I'm just going to pull up my notes here. Yeah, so as Courtney mentioned, I'm Genevieve. I'm the Director of Collections at Calgary Public Library. And I'm going to start out by giving you a high-level overview of collections, what are collections, and how do people use them. And then I'm going to pass it over to Jan, who's going to talk about how we actually select material for the library. And Susan will tell you all about that digital content, which is what we get lots of questions about. So often when people hear that word collections, they think that refers to the people who come after you and collect their overdue accounts. Luckily, our jobs are much more fun than that, I think, because in the library context, collections refers to all of the items that we have at the library. So at Calgary Public Library, that includes a wide range of both physical and digital material, everything from picture books, graphic novels, adult nonfiction, to ebooks and streaming video. All of our collections, whether they're physical or digital, are developed in alignment with the library's strategic plan and guided by the principles that are outlined in our collections policy. And Jan will talk about that more shortly. The items in our collection serve Calgarians in many different ways, as you probably have experienced using the library. They encourage reading, help develop literacy skills, they foster lifelong learning. They support both formal and informal education, and they inform, entertain, and enhance people's lives. So the core function of our department in collections is selecting content across a range of physical and digital formats. This work is carried out by selector librarians, including Jan and Susan, who I think would tell you they have the best jobs at Calgary Public Library. Physical collections continue to be the foundation of the library's collection. You'll see them at all of our locations except Prototype Skyview, which is our digital first location. But the size and composition of the collection really depends on the location size and community demographics. Central Library, of course, is our largest building, and so it has the largest collection with over 300,000 items. Fish Creek and Crowfoot both have about 120,000 items, and smaller locations would have around 10,000 items. As you've probably experienced when looking at the library, print books include subjects, formats, and genres for all ages. A baby who comes into the library, their first reading experience might begin with board books with those thick pages that can withstand chewing and rough handling. And then they might progress to picture books, which are intended to be read aloud by parents. The Learn to Read collection, which is one of the collections that is most used at the library, includes titles with controlled vocabulary and simple text, and that supports children as they develop independent reading skills. There's an increased focus on phonics in the Alberta curriculum, so parents and teachers are really interested in what are called decodable books, learn to read books, which encourage children to sound out words. So we've added a number of new decodable series in response over the last few years. Once they can read, school-age children might move on to juvenile fiction and nonfiction in a range of reading levels. And of course, young adult and adult collections include fiction and nonfiction to support learning, study, and recreational reading. Over the last several years, circulation of children's material accounts for more than half of our annual circulation of print material. So in 2023, children's books made up about just over 60% of total print checkouts, partly because we have a young city, partly because children borrow lots of books. They might go home with 15 picture books at once. And much of this circulation is driven by themed curated collections, which you might be familiar with if you have children. Those are the books that are shelved on face-out lower shelving, making it easy for children and their caregivers to select appealing titles. The early literacy theme collections include dinosaurs, things that go, palaces and princesses, and ABCs, which, as you know, are all popular topics with young children. School-age children can also select from themes such as awkward and building worlds in the fiction area, or nonfiction themes like Make It and science. Graphic novels, which you probably know are stories told through comics or illustrations, continue to be really popular for all ages. And several popular children's series that you may have read yourselves as kids have been adapted to graphic novels, including The Babysitter's Club, Magic Treehouse, and Junie B. Jones, which I think that's just coming out this month. Is that right, Jana? Right. Curated collections are also available in the adult collection. You might have borrowed from our We Recommend collection, which groups books by people, plot, place, and prose. So you can choose the element that most appeals to you. In the past, plot has really been the most popular of the We Recommend themes, but there's been a real explosion of interest in romance recently, and that's led to the people theme surging in popularity. In adult nonfiction, the topics that are most popular are medicine and health, food and drink, psychology, English language learning, and social sciences. So that indicates, I think, that Calgarians are using the library to support their health, wellness, quality of life, learn about social issues, and improve their English. So I'm going to turn it over to Jan now, who's going to talk a little bit more about how we actually do selection and get all these books into our collection.
Great, thanks, Genevieve. So as Genevieve mentioned, we do have a collections policy. The collections policy is a guiding document that we use to inform collection development. The policy is available on our website. If you go to Calgary Public Library's website, you can do a search for library materials, and it should be the first result that you get if you're interested in reading it. What the collection policy does is it gives us an overarching goal or a vision for the collection. It includes some criteria that we use when we are selecting materials. Up on the slide, you can kind of see some goals that the collection aims to meet. And it's really the job of the selector to pick materials that align with the policy and help the library achieve these goals. Slide. Some of the criteria that is in the policy and some of the criteria that we use when selecting material include community interest, currency and accuracy, local perspectives, availability, budget, and intellectual freedom. So we do use other criteria, but these are kind of the main ones that we use when we are selecting material. So for community interest, do Calgarians want to read that book? Is the book something that is of a topic that is of interest to Calgarians? Currency and accuracy. Currency is a big consideration, especially when it comes to our nonfiction collection. There are areas like technology or health where things are changing, and we want to make sure that we have the most current information. So we're aiming to pick the newest material and not necessarily looking at older material in those areas. Local perspectives. We support the local author community, and we also look for books that are from a Canadian perspective. So like many things, publishing is influenced by American politics, American topics. So we do our best to try and make sure that we are getting that Canadian perspective into our collections. Availability. So availability is tricky for many people, including us. There's things called Canadian rights, and it's very political and hard to determine sometimes. But what it means is that essentially sometimes books, for example, are written in the UK and they're published in the UK, and somebody might read about them if they're reading UK media. But the book doesn't have rights to be purchased or released here in Canada yet. Generally, they will be. It takes about a season to get those Canadian rights. But it is something that we are checking to make sure that we are kind of following the Canadian rights and picking up things that have Canadian rights. The other thing with availability is that books go out of print. And when they go out of print, it means, unfortunately, they're not available for purchasing anymore. They are not being printed, so we can't pick them up. That's more in print than in digital. Digital, obviously, out of print doesn't quite mean the same thing, but it is a consideration when we're picking up materials for the collection. Of course, budget. Budget is a consideration. It's something that we are constantly monitoring our budgets to see what we can buy and how much of something we can buy in order to meet the need that is in our collection. And then intellectual freedom. So the library endorses the Canadian Federation of Library Associations Statement on Intellectual Freedom, as well as the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions Statement on Libraries and Intellectual Freedom. So our collection policy does talk about intellectual freedom as well. And what essentially it means is that our collections, with them, we aim to provide the widest possible access to information that we can, the widest possible access to thought, opinion, so that people can engage in that kind of civil discord about certain issues, certain topics. We aim to ensure our collections have breadth and depth, that they are reflective and inclusive of the community that we serve. And that does sometimes mean that some resources that we select for the collection could be considered controversial, unconventional, or unpopular. But ultimately, it is the right and the responsibility for the choice to engage with our library materials. It's up to the patron to engage. And we don't, think about why somebody might be wanting to read something. There's many reasons why somebody might want to read something. And the availability of the content in our collection, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are endorsing it. Again, we are engaging with intellectual freedom and providing people the opportunity to read what they feel they want to read. Next slide. Thank you. So that's all kind of high level policy stuff, but what does it all mean for what does the selector do all day? So what we do is there's actually 6 selectors in our department, and we all have areas of responsibility that we select for. Myself, I'm the children's selector, the children's selection lead, which means that I'm looking at anything for that 0 to 12 audience. So as Genevieve mentioned, board books, picture books, the Learn to Read collection. We have other selectors. We have an adult fiction selector, so she'd be looking at adult fiction. We have selectors that work in adult nonfiction, and then Susan is our digital selector. And I'll save her discussion of digital for her. So selectors select what we buy, so the actual specific titles, but also how much of something we buy and which locations that book might rest in. So how do we find out about new titles? So we work with publishers. Publishers, there's the big 5 that you may be familiar with. So that's Penguin Random House, HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, just to name a few. But we also work with smaller Canadian presses like Anansi or Groundwood, again, to make sure that we're getting that Canadian perspective and supporting Canadian authors. Publishing is cyclical, so for the most part, publishers put out new titles kind of 4 times a year: spring, summer, winter, fall. And they release catalogs, and so the selectors go through those catalogs and evaluate those new titles. Sometimes when we're looking at catalogs, we do wait and we might kind of go, oh, I'm not sure. So we might wait and see about a review. So a professional review that comes out and looks at the book, and then we might use those reviews to inform our selection. The reviews are really helpful because sometimes they are able to determine and help us inform us on who the audience for a material is. So is it really more of an academic novel or an academic audience versus a public library audience? So those reviews are really helpful. So we look at Publishers Weekly, School Library Journal, Book List, and Quill Inquirer. We also keep lists of classic titles. So there are classics that we feel should always be in a library collection and in our library collection. So everything from How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Handmaid's Tale, Charlotte's Web. So we keep these lists and we revisit them every year to see if we need to repurchase and rebuy any of those, because copies have worn out in our collection because people are always reading those. We also rely on data, obviously, to inform how and what we're buying. So if an author has a new title coming out, we might look and see, well, what did their last title? How did it circulate? Who was interested in it? If we're Calgarians resonating, was it resonating with Calgarians? And that would help inform us about how many copies to buy and even what library locations to put a title in. If it did really well at a branch, we'd put the next one. If maybe, it didn't do so well at a branch, we might not put it there and we try it somewhere else. So that data really informs that selection work. And then we do environmental scans. And that's kind of a big word for saying that we're looking constantly to see what is buzzing out there. What are people talking about? So that could be checking the Calgary Herald and the Globe and Mail and seeing what they're promoting. It can be following book clubs like Oprah and Reese Witherspoon's book clubs, which has new titles. We were talking about one this morning that Reese Witherspoon has out. So looking at what they're promoting, because of course they are drivers to titles. And then there's social media. And I think in the last 5 years, social media has continued to influence and change publishing. So specifically Book Talk, if you're familiar with Book Talk, and how that has really influenced the interest in romantasy and romance books. So we're constantly looking at that piece and that environmental scan to see what is buzzing, what is trending. Sometimes there's surprises in there that we weren't expecting. And sometimes we're like, yes, we think this one will take off on social media. So I think Susan's actually going to talk a little bit more about the social media influence, and specifically when she looks at the title for a romantasy title that you might be familiar with, Onyx Storm. So I'll give it to Susan.
Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me. You okay? Okay, good. All right. So thanks, Jan. We're going to talk a little bit now about the digital library. Uh, the digital library that we have at Calgary Public Library is uh, really diverse. We have a lot of different resources. On the screen now, you will see just two I've pulled up, but we have quite a few ranging from language learning resources, so like Rosetta Stone, Road to IELTS, and Pronunciator. We also have career and job searching, so we have resume builders. We also have LinkedIn Learning for Library, which is really amazing for upping your skill set for any kind of technology technology things that you're trying to upgrade. We have research databases and encyclopedias like ancestry.ca, Academic Search Premier. We also have student supports like BrainFuse, which offers real-time live tutoring and follows the Alberta curriculum, and Celero, where you can find some of the key guides that students are scrambling over in our physical collection. We also have resources for accessing newspapers such as Press Reader, as well as the New York Times Online. But we also have alternatives to popular streaming services. So why go to Netflix when you can come to Canopy? Canopy, if you're not aware of it, it is our streaming service that we have. You can connect through it through Libby, and you can also connect through it off of our website. You can download an app, and you can, if you have a smart TV, you can even have the app on your smart TV too, which is really neat. And users are given 14 credits a month to put towards watching movies, documentaries. There's even some courses on there, which are really cool. And we also have Freegal. Not a lot of folks know about Freegal, and that's our streaming music platform. And you can download an app for your mobile device and stream popular music, just like you would on on Spotify, or through YouTube Music. So you can see they have Cowboy Carter by Beyonce on there. I'm just saying that we got some good stuff on there. We have lots of different playlists and everything there as well, and encourage you to go and check that out. But the biggest and most popular resource that we have, which you're probably familiar with, is Libby. I can't see your faces, but I'm assuming, and I can't see your hands, but if I say who has ever used Libby, I'm going to assume majority of you are putting your hands up right now, because Libby is the app that we use and most public libraries across North America use for listening to audiobooks or reading ebooks. In 2024, we had a really big year. We hit some milestones in 2024. And I have it up here on the screen. So we had just over 5 million checkouts. We had over 120,000 unique users and 2.5 million holds were placed, which is remarkable. And we have a very robust digital collection within Libby. And our circulation and the diversity of our collection is amongst the highest, not only in Canada, but in North America. And we're second in the country, second in Canada behind Toronto, which is pretty darn neat, I think. And so far in 2025, because these numbers are from last year, we're seeing about a 4% increase in users using the app. So they're borrowing ebooks and audiobooks. They're getting access to free magazines from all around the world within that app. Calgarians love the library and they love Libby. But with all of that love comes a couple of challenges, which I'm sure if you're a Libby user, you probably know where I'm going next. And that has to do with the long hold queues. You may have noticed when you place a hold on a title in Libby, it will give you an estimated wait time. It could be as quick as, oh, it's going to be available in a couple of weeks, to it's a several months wait. And we're not alone in experiencing that. Libraries across the country are experiencing it. And we're trying our best to work within the confines that we have, but in the world of ebooks and e-audiobooks, we're really stuck with how the publishers are setting up their lending models and setting their prices. A lot of the prices are fairly inflated, so it makes purchasing multiple copies of really popular books a big challenge when your budget is limited. When we purchase a title for Libby, we have several different licensing models that those books could come with. So a ebook, when we buy a license or buy an ebook, we're typically just buying one copy. So we're buying the license to access that book, and each one of those represents one license for one user. So that's what you're borrowing when you borrow an ebook or an audiobook from Libby, is you're borrowing the license to have access to that book. And those, for the most part, those licenses are considered metered access. So that means that they will expire after a certain amount of time or after a certain number of checkouts. Once the license expires, the library has to purchase that license again to ensure that it remains in the collection. Their prices can change fairly quickly and without warning, and they could go up, they could go down. It's a pretty dynamic environment to be selecting titles within. But this recent article that came out in December was highlighting some of the struggles that Canadian libraries are experiencing. And we have a link down there below if you wanted to go and check it out. Yeah, so let's go into an example of when about these metered access licenses and really popular books. So Jana had mentioned a very popular romantasy book, Onyx Storm. The author, Rebecca Yarros, is a social media darling. Everybody wants to read this entire series. They all want to be in on it. And I'm sure I am not alone. I'm sure there are lots of people here on this call today that either have this on hold or have read it or are waiting for it. And we have currently right now over 1,400 holds on the ebook for this ebook format for this particular book. And I've provided here some examples of why it's so challenging to be selecting in digital, because the pricing is very different for libraries compared to what it is for consumers. So we can see here that consumer pricing, if you were to purchase Onyx Storm as an ebook through Amazon or through Kobo, it's about $16.99 at the time when we were compiling all this information. The audiobook, which you can purchase from Kobo, it's $41. Hardcover, $29.99. Library pricing, the ebook is $85 per copy, and it expires after 24 months. So if each person gets 21 days with their ebook, it's a long time. Sometimes you might be on that list and there's a chance that the license could expire before you get it. I hope that doesn't happen, but unfortunately, that's the way the licensing works. With audiobooks, we have a little bit more stability with an audiobook in that the lending model that audiobooks normally come in is called a one copy, one user. So that means the copy will not expire. We can purchase one and we can keep it until we decide we don't want it anymore. So that's great. But the unfortunate thing is that it's almost $160 per copy. Now, audiobooks, some publishers have been releasing a different licensing model, which has been helping us relieve a lot of the pressure that are on these long hold lines. And that is a metered access license that allows 100 concurrent users to access that book. So that means if there are, 1,400 holds on something like Onyx Storm, I can purchase a couple of these different licenses, the 100 concurrent users, and make it easier for everybody to have a great weekend to be able to access this book immediately. So that's great, but once all 100 copies are borrowed, then that disappears, and then I'd have to do it again. So that is one of the challenges right there. Give me a second here. That the 100 concurrent lending model is great for relieving pressure, but it's not a long-term fix. One of the other fixes that we're using to help alleviate a lot of the holds and to get more popular books into the hands and the ears of all of our active Libby users is to put books in Skip the Line. If you're a Libby user, you may have noticed Skip the Line. We have it located for adult fiction and nonfiction on the main page of Libby. Then there's also another list on our kids page within Libby. And Skip the Line is awesome because it means that we can put a couple of copies, or in this case with Onyx Storm, we can put a lot of copies in there to get them circulating more quickly. Users can borrow up to 55 items at 50. I've just wrote this down and I've already forgotten it. Oh my goodness. I know that you can only put 30 holds on your Libby card. And that's the big thing. You have a limited space for those holds. And when we put a lot of things in Skip the Line, when a Skip the Line copy becomes available, because you cannot place a hold on a Skip the Line copy, it will prompt you in your app to ask you if you want to borrow it. So with Onyx Storm, we've had the majority of circulation with Onyx Storm has been through Skip the Line. So it means that we can get through. We can get that book into as many hands as we possibly can at a quick pace. And the fifth book campaign has helped support our use of Skip the Line in Libby. So that's one of the things I was very happy to do last week and this week. So right now, there are currently over 1,000 titles in our Skip the Line. You might see on the website, it only shows 120, but only the books that are available to borrow will show up there. So with over 1,000 titles in that Skip the Line category, and there's usually, I think, about 120 that usually show up on the page. Yeah, there's lots to choose from. People are using it. The other option that we have for helping to mitigate these pressures is especially for audiobooks, because audiobook use is going up this year. That's what we've found. Whether folks are listening to their audiobooks while they're commuting, or they're wanting to get their book club reads done in a speedy time, people are reading a lot through audio. And we've put some investment into always available audiobooks. These are yearly subscriptions that we have for select copies of audiobooks. Right now we have just over 600 that are available to be borrowed right now. These books do not have you don't need to place a hold on them or anything like that. They're ready to go. And we're updating the content fairly regularly. So here on the screen here is just a quick little list of some of the titles that were just recently added. So we have a couple of Canadian authors down there on the bottom with Sue Chang, Jenny Holiday, and Leonard Cohen. And those are all available to be borrowed right now. And I did a little look before we started this presentation, and I know that basically since today, In the last couple of days, there have been 2,600 checkouts of always available audiobooks, basically since Monday. So that's pretty impressive. Yeah, and so that's all I want to say right now for our digital library portion, and I'm going to throw it back over to Genevieve.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, and I was just going to mention one of the projects that we're excited about to wrap up here, and that's that we are just starting to build collections for 3 new library locations that are going to be scheduled to be open in 2027 and 2028, and that's Walden, Belmont, and Simons Valley. So that's a big project for us. We're going to be buying over 100,000 print titles for those 3 locations in total. So that's going to keep us really busy for the next couple of years. Susan will be buying digital content too, but we'll be busy buying print materials. I think that's all for us, so I'll turn it back over to Courtney.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I imagine that, like myself, our audience members have learned a lot in today's presentation. My big takeaway is that I've got to get on Freegal because I need to stop sending all of my money to Spotify. And I think that's always the amazing thing really in talking to any of our library colleagues, but I always find it when chatting with the collections team is I always learn about resources that even being in this beautiful central library building almost every day, I still don't know about them. So much value, of course, that you can get from your library card. We've had lots of different questions submitted, so I'm going to throw them over to the 3 of you and feel free to jump in and answer as you like. Someone has asked, are the ebook and audiobooks unlimited uses during the paid period? I think just looking for a little bit of clarity on that one there.
So I'm wondering, I don't quite understand the question in terms of, oh yeah, so we have complete, I'm gonna minimize this because I'm getting distracted by everybody's great questions. Here we go. I'm not sure if this is exactly the question that you're asking, but when we purchase any of the concurrent lending models for the books, or any of the licenses that even if they end up expiring, but you've checked it out and it expires before you return it, it's not going to remove itself from your account or anything like that. You have it until the end of your lending period, and then after that, when it is automatically returned to the library, then it is weeded from there. Yeah.
I was going to say, Susan, it looks like person's followed up with a question if they borrow 3 or 4 times to finish, are they adding to the limit? And I think it depends on the model. We do have some licenses where it's 24 uses. So if you borrow it 4 times, you've used up 4 of those uses. Some of them are time-based loans, so it's 2 years, so you can use it as many times as it can circulate in that time period. So I think that adds a bit more context there.
Yes.
As a kind of my own follow-up to that question, are there ways, I'm also, I would consider myself a Libby power user. I recently realized there's the 30-book hold limit on Libby because I hit it. Is there a way to be a responsible, we all know how to be a responsible library user in general, try to return your books on time, make sure they're there for the next person. Are there any guidelines that you guys have for how to be a responsible Libby user, especially facing budget pressures?
I know it's, I'm kind of guilty of doing this too, of using my holds as my wish list for what books I want to read, especially when the hold lists are really, really long, and you don't know when they're going to show up. One of the things that we like to encourage folks to do is to, especially if you're using the app, you can place your own tags on the books that you want to read. You can create a wish list through there of the books that you want to read and only place holds on the ones that you're actively wanting to read. And I also encourage folks to return their book as soon as they're done with it. You get a cool little bouquet of flowers when you return early, and it's animated, and it's very satisfying when it pops up. But that is my my biggest tip is for that, is just to return it early if you can. It will return on its own for sure, but returning it early gets it back into the hands of more people.
Great. Someone's asking, is it possible to request a book to be added to the collection?
Yeah, we do have a feature on our website where you can suggest a title for the collection. That's for print books for kids, teens, or YA. For Overdrive, there's the Notify Me tags that Susan can explain, but you get 2 suggestions a month that you can submit through that form.
Are there a certain number of requests that you as a selector need to see come through before you'll consider adding a book to the collection, or does that not really have much to do with it?
I think we would go back to the criteria that we talked about and whether a book meets that criteria. So if one Calgarian is suggesting it to us, this is something that other Calgarians would like to read. So we don't necessarily need that second suggestion to make that decision.
Although I think Susan sometimes needs more Notify Me tags. I don't know, Susan, if you want to talk about Notify Me tags and Libby.
For sure. So new for this year is that we're relying on Notify Me tags in Libby to understand what people are wanting to read in our collection. So Notify Me tags, if you've never tried using them before, when you're within the Libby app, so if you're on your phone or if you're accessing it through a web browser on your computer, you can do what's called a deep search. So if you're trying to find, a book that you heard mentioned, on a podcast that you were listening to, you can do a search in Libby. It will show up as if we may have it, we may not. And if we don't have it, there will be a little bell that shows up that says notify me. And that's when you click on that little bell, that actually tells me that there are folks interested in it. I run reports almost daily to see what people are requesting. So for example, I ran one from the weekend to see what people have been requesting in Libby. And there was an older book from 2009. And I wondered, why in the world are people wanting this academic text about fashion from 2009? And then I realized, because there were about like 10, 15 tags on it, lots of people asking for it. And then I realized, oh, it's because the Met Gala was on the weekend, and this is the book that was done by the curator of the guest curator for the Met Gala. So that made sense. So I am seeing them, even if it feels like you're putting a tag on there, and it's like, oh, I don't know if anybody's seeing this. I see it. I see them all. That sounds ominous, but but I do see them. Yeah.
It's always useful in this world of chat bots that we all deal with sometimes to wonder if you're just putting something out into the ether. But yes, Susan is the real life face behind that bell. So you are notifying Susan. Susan, you mentioned when you were speaking the value that some of the donations from the 5th book campaign have already brought to collections as a whole, and specifically to some of your work as a digital selector. I will preface this question by just letting everybody know that thanks to the generosity of I'm sure many of the donors that are in our digital room today, we've already been able to give the library collections team $100,000, and our campaign's only been running for a month. So your every dollar helps, and it really is making a real impact right away. So again, thank you to all of you who have made donations to the campaign so far. But one of the folks on our call today is wondering, you mentioned as a result of this, you've been able to put lots more copies into Skip the Line. This person's wondering if you can explain what Skip the Line is.
Sure. So Skip the Line is essentially a place where we can put additional copies of a very popular book that have a shorter loan period on them. So you can only borrow a Skip the Line book for 7 days, and it cannot be renewed. If we have any folks that have been with the Calgary Public Library for quite a while, you may have remembered we had another version of this in our physical collection with our new books that were coming in, and you could only place them you couldn't place a hold on them, and you could borrow them just for a week at a time. It's a similar kind of thing. So As a result, though, because we may put quite a few copies, like if I think about the Let Them theory, which is a nonfiction self-help book by Mel Robbins. It's probably the most popular book in the world right now, I think. And that we have 120 copies of the ebook. Majority of them have been put into Skip the Line to deal with the well over, I think it's close to 2,500 holds or something like that that are on it. So as a result, it will look like when you're looking at Libby, it might look like, oh, you only have 10 copies. And there are a lot of holds on only 10 copies, but that's actually not true. There are quite a few more copies. It's just they're not going to pop up because they're all being borrowed. They're all in Skip the Line. So with Skip the Line, we need to have at least 2 permanent copies in order to place one of them in Skip the Line, and that is what the 5th book campaign money has allowed us to do for a lot of the really popular and most recent titles we've bought in the last 24 months. We've been able to get an additional copy of that so that one of them can go and skip the line and get them circulating a little faster.
That's great to hear. Thank you. Someone who is already using Canopy is wondering, noticing that they're only able to get 7 films per month now on Canopy, and just wondering what inspired that change.
I can talk a little bit about that. Canopy is what we call a pay-per-use resource. So with most of our digital resources, we pay a set fee for the full year, but with Canopy, it's based on use. So every time someone borrows a movie, we pay a cost for that. So every ticket that is used, we pay for. And so one of the things that we were finding is that our costs it wasn't sustainable. So we did reduce the number of tickets because we just couldn't afford to have sort of the number that we were at. So again, this is something that funds from the foundation always help us with when we're looking at resources like this. But that's also one that the more people use it, the more it costs us. And we love it when people use our resources, but it can be pricey for a cost per use resource like Canopy.
Mm-hmm. Somebody just asking a point of clarification if Overdrive still exists.
All right. So the tricky thing is that Overdrive is the name of the company that owns Canopy and owns Quello Concerts and owns Libby as well. Overdrive is also, if you have a Kobo e-reader, it will say Overdrive in your e-reader as well. It will not say Libby. So it's incredibly confusing. Overdrive exists, but the support for the old Overdrive apps is no longer there. So if you have an older device that you have an older Overdrive app inside of it, it's not going to work. They made the switch over to Libby in 2023, I believe it is now, and everything's happening in Libby. The majority of users are all using the Libby app and accessing their books through there, as opposed through what would have been Overdrive, the old school way of going off of our website and clicking through the browsing collection there. I don't know if that makes sense.
Thank you. Question here, wondering how decisions are made about book series and whether they are digital books or hardcover books. This person just mentioning a story of, looking at only book 9 in a 10-book series that was purchased as an ebook, it looks like, instead of a hard copy, and maybe why that might happen sometimes.
Yeah, I can answer that one. So it's possible that we just missed book 9, and that's where you could put in a suggestion in our suggest for purchase link in our website and say, we've got all the series and we don't have book 9, it's only available in ebook. Occasionally, publishers will and authors will do a novella that they only release in Overdrive or in Libby or an ebook format. And they market it as book 9, but it's really just a novella, and sometimes those are only in ebook. So it's worth putting in a suggestion, and we can see if we can get it. And if not, you do get a response with suggest for purchase that will tell us whether we've bought something or perhaps why we couldn't get something. So that's a good resource if we've missed a book, or if you're curious about why a book isn't in our collection in the format that you're looking for.
Great. We have a couple other questions that were submitted through some direct chats to us as well. So we'll just zip through those since we've got a few more minutes to go. Someone asking a really interesting question about how you make decisions if books in another language make it into the library. Who makes those choices? How do you evaluate those?
I can talk about that. Yeah, we have what we call our world language collection, and we collect 20 languages in that collection, and that's based on demographic information and community needs. So it's the sort of top 20 languages that are spoken in Calgary. The way that we select world language material for our collection is different than the way we select in English language material, the way that Jana talked about. Because it's challenging to get some of that material, we work with vendors who actually purchase the material for us. So we will say, for example, we want you to spend this much money on Punjabi books, and these are the broad subject areas that we're looking for. And those vendors actually go out and purchase that material for us. So we're not ordering on a title by title basis. And so we're not able to accept suggestions for specific titles in other languages because of the way that we purchase. And we're just not able to get title by title copies in books in world language materials. So, yeah, hopefully that answers that question.
Somebody, and I feel like I have this question too, so it's a good point of clarification. Are the American tariffs currently impacting books? And is this something that I think we're all a bit confused about what has tariffs and what doesn't these days? Speak for myself, but and if not, is this something the library's concerned about as the year goes on?
Yeah, this has definitely been something that we've been talking about for a while. Right now, our understanding is that the tariffs are not impacting books. Books are actually excluded under some of the current trade agreements. There was some conversation about the Canadian government putting reciprocal tariffs on books so that if books were coming across the border, they could have tariffs applied. And that was a topic of conversation for libraries and publishers as well, just because of the complexities of the publishing market. There's a lot of Canadian authors who might be printed or who might have their titles with American publishing houses. So it might be a Canadian author, but if it's shipped from the States, it would have a tariff on it. And that would definitely have an impact on Canadian authors, publishers, and libraries. So for now, there are not, the Canadian government hasn't implemented those reciprocal tariffs, but it is something that we are definitely keeping an eye on. And there are other issues too, even just if, for example, lots of books now are printed in China. So if there are tariffs on Chinese goods coming into the States and then they are shipping those to Canada, that could increase our costs. So there's not specifically in Canada tariffs on books, but American tariffs can impact publishing. And so we are likely to see some increases in prices. And of course, if American publishers get a lot of their paper from Canada, so if that's tariffed when it goes into the States, it causes probably price increases. So it's very complex, and we don't know exactly what might happen, but it is something we're keeping an eye on for sure.
Great, thank you, Genevieve. That's a great answer, and I think just serves to highlight a lot of the complexities that your team deals with under regular circumstances, never mind what we've seen so far already in 2025, and just another illustration of the pressures of rising costs broadly and also rising demand. Well, let's get away from that unpleasant subject and end on a lighter note. I think this is a really fun question. Somebody has asked, how do I get your job? And I think this is meant in in agreement with you, Genevieve, that it certainly does sound like Janet Susan have maybe the two best jobs in all of Calgary. And I think this person's probably just curious about what's required. How do you get to the point that you're at and be able to do this really interesting work?
That is a great question, and we do get that question a lot. And I think a lot of people don't know that librarians actually have master's degrees in library and information science. So both Jan and Susan and I, we all have master's degrees in library information science. But there are lots of jobs at the library that don't require that degree. So many of the staff that you'll meet at your community library don't have that master's degree. So there are ways to work at the library without a master's degree. But if you want to work in collections, at least as a selector, you do need that master's degree.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much to the three of you. I'm conscious that we're just about out of time. If anybody else has any other questions or comments, do feel free to put those in the Q&A function here. We'll make a note of them, and we can always follow up with our three guests here to get you answers, so that you can keep using our collection to its limit. Really want to thank all three of you so much for participating today. We really learned a lot. I definitely learned some new things, and as I do every time I talk with any of you. As Susan mentioned, and as I mentioned before, we're really grateful to this donor community for really rallying behind the Fifth Book campaign. We've only been out publicly for 4 weeks. We've already raised nearly $200,000 and already sent $100,000 of that to our collections team so that they can start making a difference and getting those hold lists down. And we're looking forward to sending them more donations soon so that they can keep doing that great work. We do have more to do. We have $1 million goal for this campaign before the end of the year. So if you feel inspired following today's webinar and you'd like to support the campaign, a donation of any amount makes a huge difference to us. So you can visit thefifthbook.ca for all of your different donation options, or just to learn a little bit more about what we're doing. Perhaps you're here because you've already donated to the campaign and you just wanted to learn a little bit more, in which case, thank you so much. And I also wanted to take this moment to share sort of a unique opportunity that we have for our donors. It is possible for the first time ever to put your name onto a shelf at Calgary Public Library, and you don't even have to be an author to do it. So isn't that great? For more significant contributions to this campaign, starting at $2,500, you can have the opportunity to put your name on a shelf and name that shelf in honor of maybe a loved one, family member, friend, or perhaps just for yourself, or sponsored by your community service organization, or maybe your book club. Sky's the limit there. So all of these opportunities are on our website at thefifthbook.ca. You can learn all about it, and our team is always very happy to chat with anybody who has additional questions. So once again, in closing, thank you so much to Genevieve, Jan, and Susan for sharing your time and your expertise with us today. We are so lucky to have such great colleagues like you and folks like you looking after our to-be read lists. I know I'm extremely grateful. So thank you all, and thank you everybody today for joining us. We will be circulating this recording later today or tomorrow. And as I mentioned before, please do share it widely if you learned something. We'd love to educate some more folks on the wonderful world of collections and keep building momentum for the Fifth Book campaign. So thank you all. Have a lovely afternoon.